Have you ever heard the incredible story of Zoey, the nun who became a legend? This isn't your typical fairy tale. This is a story of resilience, of turning tragedy into triumph, and it all begins in the heart of England, way back in the year 1600. Imagine a peaceful convent, its stone walls echoing with quiet prayers. Here, a young nun named Zoey, just 16 years old, found her purpose. While others were deep in study or contemplation, Zoe's heart was in the earth. Her duties were in the convent's gardens, and it was there, among the budding flowers and rows of vegetables, that she felt most at peace. She had a special touch, a way of coaxing life from the soil that seemed almost magical. Her hands, though young, were skilled, and the gardens flourished under her care, providing sustenance for everyone within the convent walls. Life was simple, predictable, and for Zoey, it was fulfilling. But the winds of change were blowing across England, and soon her quiet world would be shattered forever. The tranquility of the convent was brutally interrupted by the clash of steel and the roar of cannons from a nearby battle. The conflict, a storm of violence that raged just beyond their sacred grounds, paid no heed to the sanctity of the convent. Stray cannonballs and the chaos of retreating soldiers brought the war right to their doorstep. The walls that had stood for generations crumbled, and the peaceful gardens Zoe so lovingly tended were scarred by the conflict. When the dust finally settled and a deafening silence fell over the land, a horrifying reality emerged. Zoe, who had managed to find shelter deep within the cellars, was the sole survivor. At just 16, she was utterly alone, surrounded by the ruins of her home and the ghosts of her sisters. In that moment of profound loss and desolation, it would have been easy for Zoe to despair, to give up. But within this young nun was a core of unshakable strength. She looked at the damaged gardens, the fields torn by battle, and she didn't just see ruin. She saw potential. She saw a new beginning. She knew that prayer alone wouldn't rebuild her world, nor would it feed the hungry people in the surrounding villages who were also suffering in the aftermath of the battle. With a resolve that defied her young age, Zoe made a decision that would change the course of her life and the lives of countless others. She would not just rebuild the garden, she would transform the entire convent into a thriving farm. It was a monumental task, a seemingly impossible dream for a lone teenager in a war-torn land. But Zoe's faith was not just in the heavens. It was in the rich soil beneath her feet and in the strength of her own hands. Her first challenge was security. A young woman alone with a growing store of food was a vulnerable target. Zoe, however, was as resourceful as she was determined. She reached out to the local community, to the displaced soldiers and villagers who were struggling to find their way. She offered them a deal, food and a place to stay in exchange for their protection. Soon, a loyal group of men, weary of war and grateful for a purpose, pledged to guard the convent grounds. They became the protectors of this new enterprise, ensuring that the farm could grow and flourish without fear of bandits or scavengers. With her land secure, Zoe rolled up the sleeves of her habit and got to work. She poured all of her energy and knowledge into the land. The small convent garden expanded, field by field. She cleared rubble, tilled the soil, and planted seeds with a tireless spirit. The farm was located right in the middle of England, a perfect hub for what was to come. Word of the young nun and her incredible farm began to spread. People were drawn to her, not just by the promise of food, but by her unwavering spirit. The farm became a beacon of hope in a dark time. It wasn't just a place to grow crops, it was a place where lives were rebuilt. The gates of the convent were always open. The farm was a hive of activity all year round. Zoe, with an intuitive understanding of agriculture, implemented crop rotation and innovative techniques to ensure there was always a harvest. In spring, the fields burst with greens and early vegetables. Summer brought bountiful harvests of wheat, barley, and corn. Autumn yielded potatoes, pumpkins, and root vegetables that could be stored through the cold winter. The farm was a constant, reliable source of food in a time of great uncertainty. Its productivity was astonishing. Soon, wagons laden with fresh produce were rolling out from the convent, traveling to towns and cities across England, feeding a nation that was hungry for both food and hope. But Zoey's vision extended far beyond just feeding people's bodies. She wanted to nourish their minds and spirits as well. She recognized that many of the people who came to her, the farmhands, the guards, the displaced families, were illiterate. They had never been given the chance to learn to read or write. So, in the evenings, after a long day in the fields, the main hall of the old convent was transformed into a classroom. With the patience of a true teacher, Zoey taught them their letters. She used the Bible and agricultural almanacs as her textbooks, teaching them to read the words that could shape their faith and improve their craft. She believed that education was a tool of empowerment, a way for people to build better futures for themselves. She trained them in farming, passing on her unique knowledge of the land, but she also gave them the keys to knowledge itself. The convent became a center of learning and community, a place where people found not just sustenance and shelter, but also dignity and purpose. Years passed, and Zoey was no longer the young girl who had survived the battle. She was a leader, a mentor, and a beloved figure known throughout the land. The farm she had built from the ashes of her old life was a marvel. It was a testament to her incredible will and compassionate heart. People no longer referred to it as the old convent. It had earned a new name, one spoken with reverence and affection, the Nun's Farm. This name became legendary. It symbolized resilience, community, and the idea that one person's courage could ripple outwards, touching thousands of lives. The Nun's Farm wasn't just a place on a map. It was a story whispered from one generation to the next, a symbol of how a single seed of hope, planted in the darkest of times, could grow into a forest of prosperity. Zoey's legacy lived on long after she was gone. The farm continued to operate for generations, a thriving agricultural center guided by the principles she had established. The practice of educating the workers continued, making the Nun's Farm a unique place of opportunity and social mobility. The story of the 16-year-old nun who single-handedly built an agricultural empire from the ruins of her home became a beloved piece of English folklore. It's a story that reminds us that our circumstances don't have to define us. It shows us that even in the face of unimaginable loss, we have the power to create, to build, and to nurture. Zoey the farmer, the young nun with dirt under her fingernails and an unbreakable spirit, teaches us that the greatest harvests often come from the most broken ground. Her legend is a powerful reminder that with courage and compassion, one person truly can change the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time to hear the incredible legend of Zoey the farmer. If you found her story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of amazing figures from history. Let me know in the comments what you think about Zoey's incredible resilience. See you in the next video.